Sometimes the family you choose ain't the one you marry into or raise up from birth. Sometimes it's the one fate throws in your arms when the wind's howling like judgment and the sky's gone white with God's silence. I wasn't looking for company that winter, hadn't in years. The mountains didn't ask questions, and I liked it that way. Snow covers all sins if you let it fall deep enough, but snow don't stay quiet forever. It'll whisper things, names, regrets, ghosts that ain't got the decency to stay buried. I remember the cold first, that real cold. Not the kind that nips, no, the kind that sinks in and sets up camp behind your ribs. The kind that steals voices and leaves only breath. I thought I'd outlast it, same as every year. I had my fire, my rifle, my silence. Then the storm came. And with it, them. They weren't mine, weren't meant to be. But the wind brought 'em just the same. A woman, broken near to death. 2 little ones clinging to her like bark on a dying tree, and a note. Just 6 words that near stopped my heart. My children still breathe. Save them. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was guilt. But I opened my door and let the storm in. The wind out here don't talk. It listens. Carries things. Secrets mostly. You'd hear it brushing through the pines, low and slow, like it's leaning close to see if you'll finally speak. He didn't. Mornings came black and stiff with frost. He'd wake to the sound of the stove creaking under its own heat, a thin line of smoke curling from the chimney into the pale sky. The coffee boiled bitter. Bitter suited him fine. Every day had a rhythm, not peace, routine. Chop wood, patch leather, oil the rifle, feed the fire. He did it all with the silence of a man who knew his place in the world had long since been buried with the rest of his name. A scar curled over his cheekbone, ragged and healed wrong, like it had been, and stitched in a hurry, or not at all. He never touched it, same as he never opened the drawer that held the letters, dust-thick, untouched, tied with frayed twine. No return address. Didn't need one. Out past the edge of the slope, 2 grave markers leaned crooked in the snow. One had a name carved careful. The other, not yet. Just a slab of wood, waiting. He'd built that one last spring, though he'd never said why. Just a piece of pine. Hammered it in like he was planting corn. Inside, the cabin stood tight with silence. A coat still hung on a peg near the door, too small for him. A boot sat by the hearth, the mate of it long gone. The air held memories like it held heat, just barely. He'd talk to the fire some nights. Not loud, not even words, always. Just the kind of sound a man makes when there's no one left to hear. He wasn't hiding. He was surviving. But even he knew, winter don't leave a man untouched. It don't just freeze the land. It creeps into what's left of your heart, and waits. The wind turned angry by mid-afternoon. Clouds rolled low and mean over the ridge, flattening the sky like a boot to the back. Snow came sudden, not in flakes, but in fists. Heavy, wet, blinding. He stood at the window a while, mug in hand, the bitter brew gone cold. Didn't blink, just watched the world disappear. By nightfall, the blizzard was full upon him. The wind howled against the walls like it wanted in. Roof groaned under the weight of it. Trees bent low, branches clawing at nothing. He set another log on the fire, stoked it till the cabin glowed faint orange. Then came the sound, faint but wrong. Not wind, not the trees. Movement. He opened the door. The cold punched through like a drunk through a saloon. Snow hit his face sideways, stinging and thick. He squinted into it, heart slow, trained not to spook. It could have been anything. A mule wandered off. A coyote snent, iffing for warmth. But it was a shape, slumped. Wagons didn't come this high, not in winter, not ever. He stepped out, boots crunching through drift, each step a guess. Wind screamed past his ears. When he got closer, he saw the wheels, half buried and tilted. Then fabric, canvas torn loose, whipping. The woman lay curled near the wagon side, head down in the snow, arms around a bundled shape. Another bundle lay just beside them, smaller still. Her back rose, barely. Breath, thin as smoke. He dropped to a knee. Her face was grey, lips cracked, frozen lashes on sunken eyes. One hand clutched something, a crumpled scrap of paper, stiff with ice. He pried it loose. The words were scrawled, ink bleeding from wet. "We are lost in the storm. My husband is gone. I am weak, but my children still breathe. Please, if God leads you to us, save them." He didn't move for a long while. The storm shrieked. One of the bundles shifted. Just a twitch. A child's hand. He scooped the boy first. Light. Too light. Wrapped in rags and silence. He staggered through the white back to the cabin, laid the child by the fire, then returned. The girl whimpered when he lifted her but didn't wake. Her cheeks were raw. She had her arms wrapped around a broken doll's leg. Last came the woman. She was near stiff but still warm enough to matter. He carried her against his chest, head tucked beneath his chin. Snow soaked through his coat, but he didn't feel it. Inside, the fire crackled. Heat clawed at their skin. He bolted the door behind him and didn't say a word. Just listened to the wind hammering outside, like the storm wanted to take back what he'd stolen. The cabin held them like a cave holds fire, close, flickering, full of shadows. He'd cleared a space near the hearth, laid the children out on blankets thick with smoke and old wool. The boy, maybe 5, maybe 6, curled into himself, breath shallow but steady. The girl, older by a year or 2, stared through him with eyes wide and blank, like she hadn't yet decided if this was salvation or something worse. He stripped off their wet clothes with hands rough and deliberate, turning his back when needed, laid their small things near the heat to steam, hung the woman's coat, her dress, her shawl. No shame in it. Not here. Just survival. Her skin was pale as ash under the dirt, mouth cracked, fingers stiff and blue at the tips. He wrapped her in his spare quilt. It smelled of cedar and pipe smoke, of a life lived alone. She didn't stir. The kettle sang, sharp and shrill. He poured warm water into a tin cup, added honey scraped from the bottom of a jar, stirred slow. Then he crouched by the girl. "You drink this," he said, voice low, worn. "Careful now." She didn't answer, just watched his face like a coyote watches fire, curious, wary, halfway to gone. But she drank, tiny sips. Her hands shook. Then, a whisper. "Clara." He looked at her. She pointed to herself. "That your name?" A nod. Slow. He glanced at the boy. "And him?" "Tommy. My brother." The woman didn't wake. Not that night. He touched her wrist once. Faint pulse, but there. He left her be. Later, he fed the children beans and cornbread, cold from the cupboard. They ate like animals who knew food was a thing you don't question. When Tommy was done, he crawled over to where the woman lay and curled up against her, like he'd done it every night of his short life. Clara sat a while longer, eyes on the fire. Then she spoke again, small and sudden. "Is she gonna die?" He didn't answer. Just reached for the poker, stirred the coals. She blinked, but didn't cry. Didn't even flinch when the wind slammed the shutters again. The fire spit once. He set his back against the wall, rifle laid across his knees, boots near the hearth. Outside, the storm howled like it meant to peel the world apart. Inside, 4 strangers sat breathing in a single room, not one of them sure if they'd live to see the next morning. The heat climbed slow, the quiet stretched wide. The cabin had never felt so full, nor so hollow. The storm broke 2 days later, but the cold stayed. By then the woman had opened her eyes. Took half a day more before she spoke, and even then it came like wind through brittle grass, soft, cracked, nearly lost in the space between breaths. "Marianne," that's what she said when he asked her name without looking at him. He gave none in return. Didn't see the point. She tried to rise, failed, tried again. He didn't help, not out of cruelty, just a knowing. Folks like her, they needed to fight their way back up. He'd done the same once, and had resented every kind hand offered to him. The table in the cabin wasn't much, just planks nailed together, crooked legs, stains from spilled coffee and dried blood. But each night, they gathered round it like it meant something. Tommy stuffed bread into his mouth like it might vanish if he blinked. Clara, more careful, said thank you each time he passed her the salt or the pan. She watched him more than the others did, watched how he moved, how he didn't speak unless he had to. Marianne stayed quiet, unless the children needed something. She'd pull Tommy close when the wind picked up, or Clara got that faraway look. Her hands, raw and red, folded in her lap, like she was waiting on judgment. He cooked, every night. Beans, stew, rabbit once when the trapline paid out. Sometimes they said it tasted good. He nodded, said nothing. On the fourth night, Clara drew him something with charcoal and a scrap of sackcloth, held it out to him with a shy smile. It was the cabin, firelight in the window, smoke from the chimney, 4 stick figures inside, hands held. He stared at it longer than he meant to, then placed it face down on the shelf by the door. Didn't say thank you, but he didn't throw it away either. Later, Marianne asked him, real quiet, if he had children. He looked at the fire. Not her. Used to. That was all he said. All he ever would. She didn't ask again, just nodded like she knew the shape of grief, even if she didn't know its name. Tommy started calling him Mister, said it casual one morning over porridge, like it had always been so. Mister, your dog don't bark. I ain't got a dog, he said. Tommy looked confused. Then what's that noise at night? He paused, sipped his coffee. Wind, mostly. But it wasn't. Not always. Some nights, when the fire dipped low and the coals went quiet, something else moved in the cabin. Not footsteps, not voices, just a heaviness, the kind that fills a room that's held sorrow too long. He'd find himself sitting at the table long after the rest had gone to sleep, fingertips resting on a cup gone cold, eyes on the empty chair across from him. The one that used to be his boy's. He never said the child's name. Wouldn't speak it aloud even if someone asked, which no one did. But some nights, when Clara laid her hand on her brother's shoulder just so, or when Marianne pressed her palm to Tommy's forehead, checking for fever, his chest would ache in that old familiar way. Not pain, not exactly, just the memory of what it once felt like to be needed, and that more than anything scared the hell out of him. The snow had eased, but winter wasn't done. It clung to the trees, heavy on the pines, curled against the windows like it still meant to be let in. The wind no longer howled, it whispered now, low and drawn out, like a secret told too late. He stepped out each morning, boots breaking thin crusts of ice, and split wood while the sky bled grey above him. The rhythm had returned, but it was different now, lighter in some places. He didn't like it. Inside, the woman moved on her own again. Marianne. She stirred the beans without being asked, washed the children's clothes in a pot out back, took to mending one of his old flannel shirts, though he never gave it to her. The children played quieter these days. Clara drew more pictures. Tommy had taken to asking questions he never used to care about. Mister, you ever shoot a bear? No. Why not? He didn't answer. Some nights the children fell asleep in front of the fire, limbs tangled, mouths open. Marianne would watch them for a long while before lifting them one by one to the bed they all now shared in the corner. She moved slow, with care that came from habit, not affection alone. She'd done this before, somewhere, sometime, for someone else. Then, one morning, the sky opened blue and cruel. Sunlight hit the windows like a warning. She folded her apron, smoothed it flat on the table. We should go, she said, just like that. I'm well enough now, and the snow's done for a while. He didn't look up from his chair. Clara stopped drawing. Tommy blinked, then turned back to his game of stacking stones. You know where you're headed? He asked finally. South, she said. There's family, if they're still alive. If not, we'll find something. He nodded, sipped his coffee. Cold again. That night she packed in silence, rolled up her dress, her shawl, wrapped the few things they had into a worn satchel. The girl tucked her pictures in between the folds. He stood outside for a long time. The door cracked just enough for the warmth to brush his heels. Smoke from his pipe curled into the blue-black air. Coyotes yelped somewhere far down the ridge. He didn't ask them to stay. She didn't ask him to stop them. But when the fire burned low and the children were asleep again, he stood by their bed. Just stood there, hands loose at his sides, staring like maybe he could memorize the weight of them. Marianne stepped up behind him. You don't owe us, she said. He didn't move. She waited, but he had no answer. When she turned to go, his voice came, not loud, but firm, final. There's room here. She stopped. For the winter, for longer if needed. I got land, tools, cabin strong, got a name that don't mean much anymore. But it'll do for the law if someone comes asking. She turned, eyes unreadable in the dark. That an offer? "No," he said. "It's the truth." She didn't speak, just stood there, eyes on him, lips pressed thin, then looked to her children, then to the door. She didn't walk through it. Not that night. He went back to the fire, threw another log on. Sparks jumped. Outside, the cold didn't press as hard against the walls. The town of Everspring sat quiet under a sullen sky, all dust and dried mud, the color of old bones. Nothing stirred much but dogs and wind. Church steeple leaned a bit, saloon doors creaked, even when no one passed through them. It was the kind of place where everything had weight, names, looks, silence, and silence came first. He rode in at a slow walk, Marianne behind him on the mule, children in the wagon between sacks of beans and oats. Clara sat straight as a fence post, eyes wide. Tommy slept curled up with his head in her lap, thumb hooked in his shirt collar. They stopped in front of the mercantile. He dismounted slow, bones creaking louder than the leather. The town watched. Eyes from windows, from porches, behind curtains. Not a single voice raised, not a single soul approached. He tied the reins, brushed dust from his coat. Marianne climbed down herself, steady and proud. She didn't reach for his hand. Inside, the store was cool and close, smelling of tobacco and dried apples. An old man behind the counter looked up, blinked once. "Well," he said. "Ain't seen you in some years." "Didn't plan on being seen," the man replied. "You'll be noticed, with her and them." Marianne walked past both of them, took up a tin of salt, then flour, soap, like she'd done it 100 times. Outside, Clara stood on tiptoe at the window of the bakery next door, pointing to candy she couldn't afford. Tommy had woken and was busy, trying to steal pebbles from the boardwalk, stuffing them in his pocket like treasure. A voice cut through the air. "That her?" They turned. 3 men stood near the post office. One of them wore a badge that looked more rust than metal. Another had a Bible in his hand and a mouth that had only ever tasted condemnation. The third wore blood in his face, the same kind the cowboy had seen in his own once. "Didn't think you'd come back here," the one with the Bible said. "Didn't think I had to," he answered. The lawman stepped forward, tipping his hat. "You know you can't keep her. Ain't right. She ain't yours. Those kids ain't either." "She's not a thing to keep," the cowboy said. "She came with me. They stayed. That's all there is." The man with the blood face spat in the dirt. "Town, don't forget." "No," he said, "but it does rot. You want to talk about forgetting? Ask the graves on the hill." The pastor flinched. The lawman didn't. "You planning on setting roots again?" "No plans," he said. "Just a list of things that need doing. Fence to mend, roof to patch, kids to feed." The lawman glanced at Marianne, who stood in the doorway, silent but unflinching. "She got any say in that?" "She can walk whenever she wants," the cowboy replied. "So far, she hasn't." There was a pause then. Just the wind and the sound of Tommy humming tunelessly while poking a dead beetle with a stick. The lawman nodded once. "You stay quiet, you stay out of sight, keep to the hills. Town won't come for you." The cowboy gave a slow nod. "Wouldn't stop you if you did." They left it there. He loaded the wagon with meal, sugar, a jar of hard candy for Clara that he handed her with no smile, just a nod. Her eyes lit up all the same. Marianne walked beside him on the way out of town, not touching, but close. Behind them, the town returned to its hush, dust curling behind the wheels like a long sigh. He looked once over his shoulder, saw nothing but wood and windows and judgment, then turned his face to the road again. Let them talk, let them look, the Mount Eyes, and didn't care about names or pasts. It asked only one question: can you endure? And they could. For now, they could. No moon that night. Just the stars, hanging sharp in a black sky, like cold nails hammered into wood. The wind had settled for once, leaving the trees to speak for themselves, creaking soft like old men in prayer. Inside the cabin, the fire was low, just coals now, pulsing gentle in the hearth, enough to cast shadows and keep the frost from crawling too deep. The children were asleep. Clara's hand rested on Tommy's chest, rising and falling with his breath. She still clutched that ragged picture she drew of the cabin, folded in quarters, edges soft from handling. He sat at the table, hat in his hands, turning it slow. His coat hung behind the door, damp from snow. Marianne moved quiet, her hands wiping the same tin plate again and again, like she didn't know where to put them. She'd been quieter since town, more watchful, like something had shaken loose and was rolling around inside her, too loud to ignore. He cleared his throat once. "I've been thinking," he said. She didn't answer, but she stopped scrubbing. "This place, it don't need much. Just hands. Wood to chop, roof to patch in spring, fence line that don't keep itself straight. And winters are hard." He turned the hat again, slower this time. "I ain't one for saying things right. Ain't got no poetry to it. But if you mean to stay, I figure I could make it proper." She looked at him then, not startled, just still. "I ain't talking love," he added, almost sharp. "Not the kind they put in books, not the courtin' kind." Her voice came low. "Then what kind you talking?" He looked over at the children. Tommy let out a small sigh and sleep, like he was floating in a dream that didn't ache. "The kind that keeps him warm, fed, the kind that don't walk off when snow starts falling. I can give a name, not a proud one, but legal, and a roof, a safe place." She nodded just once. "I ain't asking nothing in return," he said. "Ain't claiming nothing either. Just seems like a waste. All of us surviving and not setting it down somewhere." Silence stretched, long enough for a log to pop in the fire and send sparks whispering up the chimney. She folded the dishcloth, set it down gentle, sat across from him. "No man's ever asked me without wanting something," she said, steady. "You saying you don't?" He shrugged. "I want peace. And I reckon I'd sleep better knowing you and the young'uns got a name to ride under. Don't have to be mine, but it's the only one I got." She studied him, the rough lines of his face, the way his hands sat heavy on the table like they didn't quite know how to relax anymore. "I ain't saying yes," she said. He nodded. "I ain't saying no either," she added. Another nod. "I'm saying I'll stay," she finished. "And we'll see if winter don't freeze us out first." He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "That's fair," he said. They didn't shake hands, didn't touch. She rose, banked the fire, and crawled beneath the quilt beside her children. He sat a while longer, just listening. Outside, the trees were still. Inside, the quiet didn't feel so cold. Spring came slow that year, like it was feeling out the land before committing. Snow melted in streaks across the hills, leaving behind 1,000 muddy paths and the smell of wet pine. The cabin held together, barely, but the fence needed near rebuilding and the creek ran too high for the first few weeks to cross with dry boots. By summer, Clara was riding the mare bareback, skirts flying, teeth flashing in the wind. She rode like she belonged to the land more than to any house or name. He taught her how to throw a lasso, how to spot the first signs of a storm, how to listen to the trees and know if the wind meant trouble or just wandering. Tommy took to the earth slower, quieter. He dug furrows with his small fingers, planted beans he talked to, and cried on. It's when a calf died in its sleep. The boy had soft in him, the kind that didn't weaken but made a man notice what others missed. Marianne worked with a kind of rhythm, never showy, never idle. She fixed shutters, patched quilts, learned the temper of the stove and the moods of the hens. She didn't wear a ring. But when he passed her a tin cup of coffee each morning and their fingers brushed, neither pulled away. The townsfolk kept to their stares but stopped talking loud. Maybe the seasons wore down judgment like it wore down hills. Maybe it was that picture Clara drew, tacked onto the church wall, sun over the cabin, her brother by her side, and 3 stick figures holding hands. They'd built things, not fast, not out of grand feelings or grand words, just fence posts and rows of corn, a bench on the porch that creaked when you leaned too far right, a small cross by the oak where he finally buried the unopened letters, the ground soft enough now. They took a photograph once. A neighbor with a box camera came up the mountain, asked no questions. The cowboy stood stiff in the middle, Clara leaning on him with one arm, Marianne just behind, hand on his shoulder. Tommy in front, holding a carved wooden horse. The wind had caught their hair, and no one smiled, but it was a good photo. Honest. He built a new sign over the door, carved it himself with the tip of his knife, just one word. Home. Sometimes at night, when the world went quiet and the fire gave off more shadow than light, he'd look at her across the room. She'd nod once, like she'd been waiting for him to notice what they'd done, what they'd made from near nothing, and he'd nod back. Not much had been said, but everything worth knowing had already been lived. The wind had picked up again, rustling the tall grass that had browned with the season. Snow touched the peaks like the first whispers of something. Nang bigger comin', not fierce yet, but certain. The sky was the color of tin, and the sun low behind the ridge had turned more gold than fire. He stood alone on the porch, hand resting on the post he'd carved years back, where a child's initials were still scratched into the wood with a dull nail. His hat brim tugged in the wind, but he didn't raise a hand to hold it. Just stared out at the land like it might speak again, the way it used to when he didn't know if he'd make it through another winter. From inside came the clang of a kettle. Clara's voice, deeper now but still hers, calling out for Tommy to help bring in the firewood. Laughter, then quiet, then the gentle scrape of chairs, the smell of cornbread drifting through the cracked window. He didn't turn. The trees swayed slow. A hawk glided high overhead, circling lazy. Below, the ox-wagon still sat half-buried in weeds, where he'd left it that day they'd come out of the storm. He never fixed it. Never had the heart to burn it either. A breath left him, long and low, like it had been sitting in his ribs for years. In the hush between gusts, his voice came low and worn, carried by the breeze more than by will. He thought he was rescuing them from the storm, but it turned out they'd rescued him. He let the wind carry it. Didn't need to say more. Snowflakes began to fall. Light at first, soft, drifting things that didn't cling, didn't bite. Just a reminder that seasons turn, whether you're ready or not. He stepped back inside, let the door close gentle behind him. Outside, the storm never came. Just weather now. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of the cold, the quiet pull of redemption, the hard-earned warmth of family, then keep riding with us. Subscribe for more Wild West stories, each tale forged in grit, grief, and grace. Share your thoughts. What part gripped you most? What would you do out there in the storm? Got a story seed of your own? Drop a line. The West still has echoes to carry. The frontier never really ends, not if we keep telling its truths.